Hey guys! Today I bring you an absolutely fascinating and moving story that will touch your heart and mind. It's a true account of a near-death experience where our protagonist had incredible visions about the future of Earth, including surprising revelations about 2025. But before we dive into this extraordinary story, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, because I love knowing where you're from. Oh, and if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, take the opportunity now to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this. Shall we start? My name is Serafina Alcott, and I never imagined I would tell this story. I'm not an author, speaker, or anything like that. I live a normal life in Asheville, North Carolina, with my husband, Elliot, and our 2 children. What happened to me a few years ago changed the way I see everything. And although it's difficult to talk about, I feel like maybe my experience can bring some comfort or inspiration to whoever is reading. My name is Serafina Alcott, and I have always believed that life is made up of carefully planned moments. From an early age, both my husband, Elliot, and I decided that we wanted to build a family on solid foundations. We weren't the type to take risks. We preferred security. We worked hard, we saved, and when our first son, Mason, was born, it was like everything was in the right place. Mason brought indescribable joy to our lives. Every laugh, every small step was a reminder that our effort had been worth it. I still remember when he said his first word, "Mommy." That moment seemed to encapsulate everything I had ever wanted. As the years went by, things began to stabilize even more. Elliot was a literature professor at the University of Asheville, and I worked as an interior designer, balancing creative projects with being a mom. It was one quiet afternoon, while we were playing with Mason in the backyard, that Elliot turned to me and said, "You know, Sarah, I think we're ready for the next chapter." I knew immediately what he meant. There was something in his voice, a tone of confidence and expectation. He was right. Our world was stable, full of love, and it seemed like the ideal time to expand our family. When the pregnancy test came back positive, I was ecstatic. I ran over to Elliot, holding the small device in my hand. He was sitting on the couch reading a book, but he dropped everything as soon as he saw my expression. "Serious?" he asked, his eyes shining. I nodded, unable to contain my smile. He pulled me into a tight hug, and Mason, not really understanding what was going on, ran to join us. "Does this mean I'm going to be a big brother?" asked Mason, his little voice full of curiosity. "That's right, my love," I replied, stroking his hair. "You will have a companion to play with." The following weeks were filled with doctor appointments, preparations for the baby's new room, and the constant anticipation of what was to come. We chose to keep the baby's sex a secret until birth. We liked the idea of being surprised. Each ultrasound was a special event. Elliot held my hand as we looked at the screen, where small black and white images showed our son or daughter growing up. "He looks healthy," said the doctor during one of the consultations. "Everything is going very well." These words were like music to our ears. There were also lighter and funnier moments, like when Mason insisted on suggesting names for the baby. Among his options were Superman and Rainbow Princess. Elliot and I laughed and promised to seriously consider all suggestions. The arrival of the 3rd trimester brought a mixture of anxiety and joy. We were ready to complete our family. The baby's room was painted in neutral tones, and every detail had been chosen with care. However, looking back now, I realize how unprepared we were for what was about to happen. At the time, there was no indication that anything would go as planned. But life has a curious way of surprising us, especially when we least expect it. That night seemed to be like any other. Lily was just 7 days old, and although we were exhausted, Elliot and I were adjusting to the new routine with a newborn at home. Mason slept peacefully in the next room, and the silence in the house was interrupted only by the noises of Lily, who was in the crib next to our bed. I had felt slight discomfort throughout the day, but I attributed it to natural postpartum tiredness. "It's just the body adjusting," I thought. The doctor had explained that the bleeding would gradually decrease, and as I was monitoring everything regularly, I didn't worry. However, around 2 in the morning, I woke up feeling intense pain and inexplicable weakness. I looked at the clock and realized that it had only been an hour since Lily had fed. Something wasn't right. I got up slowly, trying not to wake Elliot, but as soon as I stood up, I felt something strange. A sudden heat ran down my legs, and my heart raced. When I looked down, my pajamas were soaked in blood. "Elliot," I called with a trembling voice, trying to remain calm. He woke up with a start, eyes wide as he tried to understand what was happening. "Sarah, what happened?" he asked, jumping out of bed. "I'm bleeding a lot." "I don't know what's happening." He wasted no time. He picked up the phone and called 911 while I tried to sit on the edge of the bed, but I felt my body weakening by the second. "I want you to stay awake, okay?" he said, holding my hand as we waited. His voice was firm, but his eyes showed the fear he was trying to hide. I remember looking at Lily in her crib, sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the chaos unfolding around us. Please God, not now, I thought. The ambulance arrived quickly, but those minutes seemed like an eternity. I was placed on a stretcher while Elliot explained to the paramedics what had happened. The last thing I heard before we were taken away was the sound of Mason waking up and calling for us from the room. On the way to the hospital, I started to lose consciousness. I felt my body becoming weaker and weaker, and my vision became blurred. It was then that something extraordinary happened. In the midst of despair, I saw 3 figures next to me. They were tall, enveloped in a soft white light that seemed to radiate peace and serenity. They didn't say anything, but there was something comforting about their presence. For a brief moment, the fear disappeared. "Can you see that?" I whispered, looking at the paramedic next to me. "See what?" he asked, looking confused. I didn't have the strength to explain. I just closed my eyes, feeling like I was somehow safe. We got to the hospital in time, but I knew I was in danger. The feeling of closeness to something beyond life was real and frightening, but also strangely peaceful. When I arrived at the hospital, everything seemed like a blur of sounds and lights. Doctors spoke quickly. Overhead lights flashed by as I was wheeled on a stretcher through the hallways. I could hear fragments of sentences: severe bleeding, stabilize pressure, urgent. Yet even in the midst of that chaos, I felt strangely calm. The sensation was like floating between 2 worlds. My body felt distant, heavy, while my mind became clear and more alert. It was then that the angels appeared again. The 3 figures of light that I had seen in the ambulance were there, but now they seemed more defined. They wore bright white, almost translucent robes that emanated a serene energy. Their faces were indistinct, but their eyes, if you could call them that, conveyed something beyond words, an infinite understanding, a peace that transcends any earthly emotion. "You're safe, Serafina," a voice echoed, without his lips moving. "Who are you?" I asked, not realizing that my words were not spoken out loud, but rather thought out. "We are your guides, sent to help you make a choice." The choice. It was a loaded word, although I still didn't know exactly what it meant. On the physical plane, doctors were working frantically. I heard someone say, "losing pulse," and I felt something like a wave pulling me away. But the angels were there, serene, unshakable. "You can stay with us to a place where there is no pain, or you can come back. The decision is yours." My mind struggled to process what they said. To go back. For what? For the physical pain I was feeling. For the fear in Elliot's eyes. "What if I don't come back?" I asked, hesitantly. "You will find peace, but you will also leave behind those who still need you." At that moment, as if responding to the doubt that was forming in my heart, one of the angels raised his arm, and the environment around me changed. He was no longer in the hospital. I was transported to a room filled with golden light, like an eternal dawn. I could see my life as if it were a movie. Precious moments with Elliot and Mason, the first time I felt Lily kick inside me, and even simple memories like an autumn afternoon strolling through the park. "They need you, Serafina," said the angel next to me as the images continued to play. "But the choice is always yours." The idea of staying in that place of peace was tempting. The absence of pain was like a balm for my body and soul. However, deep in my heart, I knew it wasn't my time yet. I thought about Mason and Lily growing up without a mother. I thought about Elliot facing everything alone. "I want to go back," he said firmly. The golden light began to fade, and I felt a force pulling me back into my body. Before leaving, one of the angels placed his hand on my shoulder. "You received a gift, Serafina. Use it wisely." Suddenly, I was back in the hospital, My vision was still blurry, but I could hear the doctors cheering. "We managed to stabilize her," a voice exclaimed. I didn't know what had just happened, but I felt deep in my soul that something inside me had changed forever. When the angels disappeared and the sounds of the hospital became a distant echo, I had the feeling that something extraordinary was happening. I felt like my soul was being pulled out of my body. There was no pain, just an indescribable lightness, as if I were a feather floating on a gentle current of air. I could see the room where my body was. Doctors moved quickly, connecting tubes and adjusting machines. Elliot was outside, his head resting against the wall, his hands covering his face. The sight of him broke my heart. I wanted to comfort him, tell him everything was okay, but it was as if an invisible veil separated me from that physical world. Then something pulled me up. The sensation was like being carried by a current of energy, an endless flow of heat and light. When I realized, I was no longer in the hospital. I was in a place that seemed like a dream, but so vivid that it seemed more real than anything I had ever experienced. It was a library, but not like the ones we know. The walls were made of pulsing golden light, and endless shelves stretched in every direction, filled with what were not books but translucent blocks of light. Souls walked between the shelves, each seeming to absorb knowledge directly from these glowing sources. "Welcome, Seraphina," a soft voice greeted me. I turned around and saw a motherly figure. She was no angel, but her presence emanated a warm, almost familiar feeling. She seemed to know everything about me, like an old friend or perhaps something deeper. "Where am I?" I asked, still trying to understand what was happening. "You are in a place of learning, a space where souls come to understand the purpose of life, their choices, and what is to come." I walked with her through corridors that seemed to stretch into infinity. The other souls that passed by me looked at me with welcoming smiles, but said nothing. I felt connected to them in a way I had never experienced before, as if we were all intertwined by a universal truth. "Why am I here?" I asked. "You are here to see what is yet to come and decide which path you want to follow," replied the maternal figure. She led me to a large round table in the center of the library, where blocks of light began to rearrange themselves on their own, forming vivid images. The scenes I saw took my breath away. Devastating storms, burning forests, flooded cities. I felt the weight of human despair, but at the same time, something else began to emerge. I saw people helping each other, communities coming together, and a new era of compassion and harmony dawning after the chaos. "What you see is the future of Earth," she explained. "This is a time of transformation, and 2025 will be the turning point." I watched in silence, absorbing every detail. It was much bigger than me, bigger than anyone. When the images disappeared, the motherly figure looked at me tenderly. "Your journey is not over yet, Seraphina. There is a lot to learn, and your choice will be crucial." Suddenly, the library began to fade away. I felt a force pulling me again, but this time towards another destination. When the library disappeared around me, I was transported to a new space. It was vast and borderless, as if I were suspended in the cosmos. In front of me, a screen of light formed, gently pulsing with colors ranging from gold to deep blue. I knew instinctively that this wasn't just a vision, but a window into something much bigger. The same motherly figure that had guided me before reappeared at my side. His expression was serene, but full of meaning. "Now you will see what is coming," she said, her voice echoing like a whisper in my mind. The screen began to display images, each one more striking than the last. First, I saw gigantic hurricanes sweeping through entire cities. Turbulent waters submerged neighborhoods, while winds uprooted trees like twigs. Then tropical forests appeared. The air was filled with smoke, and trees were falling like dominoes in a scene of destruction. The flames licked the sky, leaving behind only ash. "Are these events inevitable?" I asked, my heart sinking as I witnessed the devastation. "These are not punishments, but consequences," replied the figure. "Consequences of humanity's choices, but also learning opportunities." As the images continued, I saw earthquakes shaking lands and entire cities being turned into rubble. But then the screen changed. Destruction began to give way to reconstruction. I saw people coming together, helping each other in the midst of chaos. One community planted trees on a devastated land, while another worked in harmony to build sustainable homes. I saw scientists and global leaders collaborating to find solutions. There were tears, yes, but there was also hope. This is the natural cycle of evolution, explained the figure. 2025 will be a pivotal year, a turning point for collective consciousness. Many challenging events will occur, but from them will be born a new era of compassion and balance. The vision moved forward, showing children studying outdoors, learning about caring for the planet. I saw a world where borders seemed less important, and people connected through common values of respect and collaboration. What can I do? I asked, feeling small compared to the grandeur of what I had just witnessed. Your mission is simple but powerful, she said. You are a spark in this vast fire of transformation. Live with purpose, inspire others by example, and teach those around you what is important. The last images on the screen were of peace. I saw families gathered, children laughing, and forests that were once destroyed blooming again. It was a glimpse of a promising future, but one that would require work, sacrifice, and unity. I felt a wave of emotion flood my being. It was as if every question I had ever asked had been answered in one fell swoop. Humanity has the strength to change its destiny, said the maternal figure, placing her hand on my shoulder. But change begins in individual hearts. The light screen slowly disappeared, and the space around me began to transform again. You still have a choice, Serafina. Stay here or return. Your journey is not yet complete. The space around me transformed into something more intimate and welcoming. It was no longer the vastness of the cosmos, nor the infinity of the library. It was an environment that felt like a reflection of my own emotions, a peaceful garden, with soft golden light filtering through the leaves of tall trees. I was sitting on a stone bench, and in front of me, the motherly figure remained serene, as if patiently waiting for my decision. Why me? I asked finally, feeling the depth of the moment. Why am I having this experience, this choice? She smiled, tilting her head gently. Because you're ready. Many go through life without realizing the connection they have with the whole. You have the opportunity to understand this now and to consciously choose how you want to move forward. Those words weighed on my heart. I knew my choice would not be simple. Part of me wanted to stay there, in that place where there was no pain, where everything made sense. It was a powerful temptation, like the final relief of a long and exhausting journey. But then I thought about my family. The image of Elliot holding Lily in his arms while Mason tugged at his shirt to get her attention came clear to me. I could feel their love, the warmth of their presence. They need you, Serafina, but the choice must be made out of love, not out of obligation, said the maternal figure, as if reading my thoughts. The garden began to change. Before me, scenes appeared of what would happen if I chose not to return. I saw Elliot alone, trying to balance work and caring for his children. He did the best he could, but his pain was palpable. Mason, once such a vibrant child, seemed withdrawn, while Lily grew up never really knowing her mother. My eyes filled with tears. They would be okay eventually, the figure said, no judgment in his voice. But your presence would make a difference. I pondered his words. I thought about everything I still wanted to do, everything I still wanted to teach my children. Mason was just beginning to understand the world, and Lily had her whole life ahead of her. What would it mean for them to grow up without their mother? But there was another part of the decision that weighed on me. If I went back, I would face the physical pain, daily struggles, and uncertainties that life brings. Staying there seemed so much easier, so much more comforting. As he pondered, the motherly figure reached out her hand. When I touched her, a wave of memories washed over me. Mason's first smile, the look in Elliot's eyes on our wedding day, Lily's kicks while she was still in my womb. It was then that I realized that the love I felt for them was stronger than any pain or fear. I want to go back, he said firmly, wiping away his tears. The maternal figure smiled, satisfied. Then go, and remember, you carry a light now. Use it to light the paths of those around you. The garden began to disappear, dissolving into a bright white light. I felt a force pull me back, and the warmth I had felt in the garden was replaced by a new awareness. I was returning to my body. Before everything disappeared, I heard the maternal figure say, "You made the right choice." As the white light that surrounded me began to dissolve, I felt myself being transported to another place, as if my soul still had something more to experience before fully returning to my body. My surroundings were a vast, serene meadow, with soft grass that seemed to move in time with an invisible breeze. On the horizon, majestic mountains surrounded the scenery, and an indescribable tranquility filled the air. It was then that I heard a laugh, light and familiar. I turned around and, to my surprise, saw Alyssa, my cousin, who had tragically passed away in a car accident 10 years ago. She looked exactly as I remembered her, young, vibrant, with that warm smile that lit up any room. But there was something different about her, something more serene and bright, as if she had reached a level of peace that transcended the world we knew. "It will be," she exclaimed, running towards me with open arms. "Alyssa?" I asked in disbelief. When she hugged me, I felt a wave of pure love, as if all the moments we shared in life were encapsulated in that simple gesture. "You have no idea how good it is to see you," she said, holding my hands and looking deeply into my eyes. "But at the same time, I hope you don't stay here for long." Her last sentence took me by surprise. "Why?" I asked, trying to understand. Alyssa smiled, tilting her head like she usually did when she knew she was about to say something important. "Because it's not your time yet, Sarah. You have so much to live, so much to do. I'm here to remind you of that." I watched her, trying to absorb her words, but the truth is that just seeing her there, so full and happy, made me feel a mixture of emotions: longing, relief, and deep gratitude. "Alyssa, what happened to you?" I asked, wanting to understand more about his journey after death. She shrugged matter-of-factly. "I am fine. More than fine, actually. I found my place. It's hard to explain, but everything that seemed so confusing before makes sense now. There is no pain here, just learning and love." Your words brought unexpected peace to my heart. I remembered the many nights I cried over your loss, the void your absence left in our family. "We miss you so much," I murmured, my hands still holding hers. "And I miss you all too, but not in a sad way," she replied, with an understanding smile. "I am connected to you in a way that does not depend on time or distance." Alyssa then leaned towards me with a serious but gentle look. "You have an important choice to make, Sarah, and I know it's not easy, but trust me, the life you still have to live is too precious to leave behind now." I knew she was right. His presence there was a powerful reminder that love transcends life and death, but also a message that my place, for now, was still with my own. "Thank you, Alyssa," she said, with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for being here." She smiled again, a smile full of love and acceptance. "I'll always be here, Sarah. Now go. Your journey is not over yet." With those words, the meadow began to disappear, and his figure became part of the light around me. My heart was lighter, my decision firmer. I knew I was ready to go back. When the reunion with Alyssa ended, I felt like I was being transported again. This time, the light around me was more intense, almost blinding, but curiously it didn't bother me. Instead of disappearing as before, it transformed, pulsing as if it had a life of its own. Each pulse seemed to tune into my heart, creating a feeling of deep connection. Suddenly, the light condensed, shaping into a figure in front of me. He was an imposing presence, but with an overwhelming calm. I knew, without anyone needing to tell me, that I was faced with something far beyond what my human mind could fully comprehend. The figure was Jesus. He wasn't like the paintings I had seen in my childhood, but his essence was unmistakable. His eyes, of indescribable brilliance, carried a depth that seemed to contain all the wisdom and compassion of the universe. "Seraphina," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it echoed inside me like a melody. I felt my legs weaken, as if gravity had intensified, but at the same time, an invisible force supported me. "Sir?" I whispered, my voice choked with reverence and emotion. "Fear not," he replied, approaching. "I'm here to walk with you, to guide you on your journey." Suddenly, A tunnel of light formed around us. The colors were vibrant, as if I were surrounded by a living rainbow. He extended his hand, and I took it without hesitation. Instantly, I was flooded with a feeling of pure love, something so overwhelming it made me cry. "There's something you need to see," he said as we began walking through the tunnel. As we advanced, scenes from my life appeared on the tunnel walls, like projections from a movie. I saw my birth, my first steps, the day I met Elliot, and the birth of Mason and Lily. Each moment passed before us, but there was no judgment, only understanding and acceptance. "All of these choices, good and bad, have shaped who you are," he explained, with a tone of infinite kindness, "and each of them has a greater purpose, even if it sometimes seems hidden." When the scenes moved to difficult moments, mistakes I made, words spoken in anger, impulsive decisions, I felt ashamed, but he held my hand more firmly. "The love you give and the forgiveness you offer yourself are the keys to moving forward." He then showed me moments that I had never realized were significant. A smile I gave a stranger on a bad day, words of encouragement to a coworker, and even the hug I gave Mason when he was scared of a nightmare. "Never underestimate the impact of love, even in small gestures," he said, with a slight smile. Finally, we reached the end of the tunnel. There, a greater light shone, a portal that seemed to radiate all that was good and pure. "You can go this way," he said, looking at the portal, "but you can also return." I knew what the portal represented. It was eternal peace, final rest. But I also knew what leaving all of that behind meant. My family, my responsibilities, my role in the world. He then looked directly at me, his eyes piercing my soul. "Your mission is not yet complete, Serafina, but the choice is yours." My heart was tight, torn between the desire to stay and the need to return. But when I thought about Elliot, Mason, and Lily, a force inside me made the decision. "I want to go back," he said firmly. Jesus smiled, and his expression was one of approval and unconditional love. "Then go, and take this light with you. May she guide every step of your path." Suddenly I felt myself being pulled again. The light around me dissolved in an explosion of colors, and as my consciousness returned to my body, one last message echoed in my mind. "You were chosen to live and share what you learned." The sensation of being pulled back into my body was abrupt, almost as if I was falling from a great height. The warmth that enveloped my soul while on the spiritual plane began to dissipate, replaced by a growing awareness of heaviness, pain, and tiredness. My senses slowly returned, and little by little I began to hear voices around me. "We are stabilizing," a firm voice announced, clearly that of a doctor. My vision was blurry, but I could make out the hospital ceiling lights and the moving figures around me. I tried to take a deep breath, but my breathing was limited, as if my body was still adjusting to the return. "It will be, Sarah, are you listening to me?" Elliot's voice called, full of urgency. I slowly turned my head to the side and saw him. He was at my side, holding my hand so tightly he seemed afraid I would disappear again. His eyes were red, and there was a mix of relief and concern in his expression. "I'm here," I whispered, my voice so weak I almost didn't recognize it. He let out a sob of relief and lowered his head, pressing it against my hand. "You're back," he murmured, his voice breaking. At that moment, I realized the magnitude of what had happened. My body was weak, my energy drained, but my heart was filled with new strength. I had returned, against all odds. The doctors began to explain to me what had happened. An extremely rare postpartum hemorrhage had caused my critical condition. They did everything they could to stabilize me, and at the last moment, my heart stopped. For a few minutes, I was technically dead. "It was a miracle," said one of the nurses, a kind-faced woman who seemed to be holding back tears. "I don't know how, but you're back." Little did they know what I had experienced in that brief interval. I knew that what had happened could not be explained by medicine alone. There was something much bigger at stake, something I could never fully put into words. As I rested, Elliot sat next to me, holding my hand without letting go for even a second. "I thought I would lose you, Sarah," he said, finally breaking the silence. "I don't know what I would do without you." I looked at him, and at that moment, gratitude overflowed in my heart. "You'll never have to find out about that, Elliot," I replied, my voice a little stronger. Over the next few days, as I recovered, I realized that my perception of life had changed. Little details, like the sound of Lily's laugh or the warm feeling of holding Mason's hand, felt more precious than ever. It was as if every moment was a gift, a reminder of how much I had to be thankful for. My near-death experience gave me a renewed perspective. The love of my family, connection to the world around me, and even the challenges of daily life took on new meaning. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew that every second was an opportunity to make a difference, not just for myself, but for those I loved. The days following my recovery were a mix of deep reflection and rediscovery. Returning home was a moment of pure emotion. Elliot took care of every detail to make everything as comfortable as possible, and when I walked through the front door, with Mason running to hug me and Lily sleeping peacefully in her crib, I felt like I was entering a new chapter of my life. I was the same Serafina Alcott, but at the same time, something inside me had changed irrevocably. I soon realized that the near-death experience had sharpened my perception of life. Simple gestures, like Mason's smile as he played with his building blocks or the sound of Lily's peaceful breathing at night, seemed to carry an emotional weight that I hadn't noticed before. There was a time, a few weeks after returning home, when I sat alone on the porch, watching the sun rise over the Blue Ridge Mountains. The colors in the sky seemed more vivid, and the air was permeated with a sense of renewal. It was there that I understood that I could no longer live the way I used to. I started making small changes in my daily life. I decided I needed to slow down and appreciate the simple moments. I used to be someone who lived on autopilot, always worried about deadlines and responsibilities. Now, I dedicated more time to the people who really mattered. Elliot and I started to prioritize family dinners, something that once seemed like a formality but has now become a ritual of connection. Mason loved telling stories about what happened at school, and even Lily, still very young, seemed to absorb the peaceful energy of those moments. One night, as I was putting Mason to sleep, he looked at me with his big, curious eyes and asked, "Mom, did you go to heaven?" For a moment, I was speechless. He wasn't old enough to fully understand what had happened, but he seemed to sense that something had changed. "I saw something very beautiful, Mason," I replied, stroking his hair, "and it made me realize how important it is to be here with you and Lily." He smiled, satisfied with my simple answer, and fell asleep soon after. It was at that moment that I decided I needed to do more than just enjoy life. He wanted to return the gift he had received. I started getting involved in small charitable actions. Once a week, he took Mason to visit a nursing home. He read stories to the residents, and seeing the smiles on their faces gave me a sense of accomplishment that no job or professional achievement had ever provided before. I also started to participate in environmental projects in our community. The visions I had during my out-of-body experience about the state of the planet never left my mind. I felt that, even with small gestures, I could contribute to a more positive future. Elliot, always my biggest supporter, has changed too. Our relationship became deeper, more connected. He often told me, "Sarah, what happened to you made us realize how much we need to enjoy life together." Even Lily, even though she was so little, seemed to grow up in a home full of purpose and love. My personal transformation was not a grand or instantaneous event, but a series of small changes that, together, redefined my life. I learned that I don't need big gestures to make a difference. A smile, a kind word, or a moment of presence can be powerful. Now, every day is a gift. I live with gratitude and focus on what really matters: my family, my actions, and the positive impact I can make on the world.